haven't done a video in like a month or more. I think it's been a little bit more than a month. But again, I've been very busy doing things. I've been kind of thinking about, I was thinking maybe I would finally make like a Patreon or whatever and like do more of my hotter takes on this subject. I finally come around to making it. I'm gonna probably link it down in the description in this video, and it's not going to be right now when I post this, so I'm just saying it might be there later. Okay, anyway, so my inspiration for this video is, as I had been like doing research for videos before this one, I would look at a lot of just like trans subreddits, especially like Egg in Real Life, and just I would just keep on seeing patterns and very unrealistic expectations of what the opposite sex is. And what I mean by that is like the men think of women in one way that women absolutely don't think of themselves as. And in fact, they do not want what these men think that these women have. And then on the other side, it's the same thing. There's no connection of what it actually is. They just have like this very vague, nebulous idea of what the other side is living as. I guess I just wanted to make this video to make it more clear as to what those gendered expectations are. Like what I've noticed, what they've been wanting and expecting. I also noticed that they don't really say exactly what it is, what is womanhood. They don't say it. They just sort of like, they fling out images and anime girls or anime boys and certain articles of clothing and such and such, and then expect people to be like, oh yeah, that's what gender is. And so I just wanted to put it in plain English what it is, because they won't do it. I'm going to. and then after that, I'm going to like go into more detail as to like what the problem is and the things that they just don't see. So I made a list between the trans males and the trans females, which are trans women and trans men. In my list, you'll probably detect some contradictions, and that's really only because there are two different types of transgender people. Well, more than that, but like the broad thing is the heterosexual ones who believe they're gay trans people, and then the homosexual ones who believe that they're straight trans people. And so like their viewpoints on life are like, they conflict. They have very different perspectives in life, because, you know, one's a minority, the other one's the majority. So let's start with the males, the trans males / trans women, trans girls. So first off, the very defining feature of womanhood is having long hair. It kind of makes sense practically why they would grow out their hair, because it'll cover their receding hairline. Anyways, next point is girls. Another defining thing is that they wear makeup, and you'll notice that with like when like a trans woman says, I do womanhood better than women because they're wearing makeup and they have really nice cared for hair, and they just think like that's what women are. Like, yes, I am wearing makeup myself, and yes, my hair is long, but I mean, I don't know. I just do it for fun. I don't do it because, look at me, I'm a woman. And it's fine to wear makeup to be like, I'm gonna attract this sex or whatever. On a strategic level, even as gay men, it kind of makes sense. Anyways, third point is girls are very soft, compassionate, empathetic, sweet, tender, and intelligent. Girls care a lot about other people. Like, yeah, I mean, that's nice, but I don't think it's necessarily true for all women. Next point, only girls experience emotions, boys do not. Like, boys aren't allowed to express themselves, whereas girls are allowed to express themselves, which I don't necessarily think is like a false observation. I think that one's pretty true. Next point is girls are submissive, not only in bed, but like in courtship and like in general, which also is very much not true. I have met so many women who are like tower over me and dominate me, like not in a sexual way, but like in a like a social way. Next point, girls are dependent on their partner or partners, and I don't know, there's been a rise in, I mean, I don't think this one's necessarily that popular of an idea or perception of girls, but I've seen it in the actions of how trans women approach relationships, and they'll always want to be in this role of I depend on my partner because that's what women do, and that's validating to me as a trans person. Next point is women are physically weak, very small, and delicate, otherwise known as the fairer sex. Like, I've seen a lot of memes and blog posts and just knowing some trans people in real life where they say these things where like they don't want to lift heavy things, they don't want to do like manual labor because that's a man's job, and if you ask me to do it, then you're invalidating myself as a woman. How dare you ask me to do manual labor? Ugh, ask a real man. So next point, lesbians genuinely like having sex together, and their sex is more wholesome, whereas heterosexual sex is harsh, selfish, brutal, whatever they perceive it as. I don't blame them for seeing this, because a lot of heterosexual pornography is like very intense and like kind of scary, so I can kind of see why these trans women look at it and they're like, ew, gross. I'm supposed to be that guy? Like, yeah, of course it's gonna be like, ooh, I don't want to be that. Although I think it's more than just, I don't like the guy here. I think it's also, well, never mind that. The lesbian thing is obviously based around pornography exclusively. I don't think they've ever met a lesbian couple, and I'm pretty sure it's just based on watching porn. Lesbian porn, lesbian, it's homosexual, I guess. Like, lesbian feels like a different thing. A homosexual in this case would just be like two girls that are probably straight and they make them do things together sexually. That's what they're seeing. And it's directed by probably a straight man, and he wants them to do something like very feminine together. And so there's like, oh wow, so women being kind to each other in sex, like wow, it's so attractive. Next point is girls are very much like how they are in porn and anime, always willing to give of themselves no matter what. Next point, for gay males, gay trans males, women are meant to be attracted to men, not men loving men. So it's like, this is what women are. They have to be heterosexual. Next point is girls live life on easy mode. So girls get it, like for instance, girls get it far easier than guys in life because people are more willing to forgive a girl's actions despite her like doing something like crazy weird and like harmful to other people. Your next point is it's easy for girls to get attention and compliments simply by being girls. Next point is girls are unintelligent and ditzy, and that one comes from bimbo pills, which are estrogen tablets. That one's very demeaning and rude. I don't like that one. Last point is girls get sexually harassed, therefore it's validating when the trans male, gets sexually harassed. The next list is females seeing what boys are, or guys, First point is boys have short hair. That's like their defining feature. This one doesn't really have any practical value to it, so I can't exactly like make an excuse for it. Like short hair, they call short hair boy hair sometimes. Next point, Boys don't wear makeup. They're always barefaced unless they're femboys. That's an exception. And by femboys, I mean girls who transition to boys who wear makeup and still dress very femininely as they would as females, but this is different. Boys are emotionless, lacking compassion. They're very stoic, often apathetic, inconsiderate, but on the other hand, there's also another like subset of girls who think that like they want to be a certain guy, and that certain guy is very paternal, gentlemanly, and like the ideal father figure, and that's what she sees herself as, or you know, actually wants in her life. Next point is boys don't connect as well to others, unlike girls. Boys are dominant, they lead a room, people respect them whenever they open their mouths. That obviously, like, duh. A man comes in, he's not the leader of what's going on, but he speaks and everybody's like, oh my god, he said words, let's listen to him. And that's what they think. Boys and like men have this sort of like majestic, weird, like royal power of authority no matter what. Boys are independent and can take care of themselves. Next point is boys achieve more or more ambitious and they can succeed. Next point, boys and men are the oppressors, therefore being male provides freedom. Next point is boys don't receive any pressure to be beautiful or handsome, therefore they're free, at least in that social realm. Next point, gay porn is more edgy and relatable for being so strong, whereas the women in heterosexual romances or porn are too delicate and weak, like weak-willed, just psychologically weak, can't take care of herself at all. She just has to completely 100% rely on the man to save her from whatever's going on. For me personally, I liked gay relationships because two men seemed more practical, sensible, emotionally and psychologically strong, and they didn't sweat the small stuff, unlike what I would see with women in media. Next point is for lesbians, girls aren't meant to be attracted to other girls, only boys are meant to be attracted to girls. It is boys swear like sailors and act generally like frat boys / douchebags. And I say this one especially because I've seen so many trans men, you know, trans females overcompensate so much where they faux red pill themselves and try to be like players, and they come off extremely like not male aggressive, but just like a fake type of aggressive. That's what it feels like. And last point is being misogynistic is validating because men do it all the time. That one's a little bit, I guess, trickier to see. At least for me and a couple people that I know, it's like being misogynistic is, maybe it's like less saying it, but more just like keeping it in your head and then like silently judging the girls around you and be like, oh, well, you're just being weak and vapid and blah, blah, blah. At least in their head, and they might write it down, but you know, I don't. And maybe they like do some actions that they don't necessarily think are misogynistic, but they turn out that way. Anyway, so this next little section this one is mainly based off of what I've seen like detransitioners say about the same sex. Also, like trans people will say, similar lines. So the trans males will look at men as brutish, evil, a burden to society, useless, arrogant, like pretty much everything that feminists claim that men are. By default, boys, they are rapists, murderers, and they're violent by nature. They are stupid as hell, inconsiderate, unhygienic, unorganized, too sexual, and therefore like frequently fetishistic and thus super gross. Boys should feel ashamed of their libido, must be toxically masculine or he's not a real man, and he's invisible and lonely. That's how they see males, and that's like the shortened version of it. Females, the trans females see girls as weak, both physically and mentally. They are oppressed, therefore powerless. They are invisible, yet too visible for the wrong reasons. Like, they are invisible in the way of their personality, who they are, what they have to say is invisible. But the only thing that is extremely visible is, like, their chest. Their sexual characteristics. Women are over-sexualized. They are just a symbol for sex or beauty. There's tons of pressure to be beautiful. Women are not creative. They are prim and proper, therefore limited in expression. No, girls can't roughhouse or goof around or be funny or something like that. Now I'm gonna move on to my analysis on these things. So, many trans people don't tend to want to define men and women in these ways. They don't want to say it in plain English, as I've said. They instead say a woman is someone who feels like a woman. A man is like how you feel. They say this, I'm pretty sure, because when somebody asks them, okay, like, define woman, what's a woman, please tell me. I mean, I don't exactly understand the social implications of, like, why this question is so harmful, but trans people really hate it when you ask them, okay, define what a woman is, define what a man is, please tell me what it is. Like, they I don't know, they just get so frustrated by it. But it's like, if you don't know what it is, then why did you like completely transform your life based on something that you can't even define? And no, a woman is feeling like one, like that. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. For me, how I escaped the idea of gender being like a separate thing from sex was acknowledging that a lot of traits, like, I remember one day thinking about, like, oh, girls are one way of being. They are empathetic, and like some of the things that I had on the list that I had started with, I would list some of those things, but then I'd think about it and compare it to, like, the gay men I've met throughout, like, middle school and high school and stuff, like, all these gay people that I knew, and they would act exactly like these things where I'd be like, well, girls and women are exclusively like this. And so, like, it really, like, I struggled in my mind to, like, piece this together and be like, why can't I put men and women in these boxes? Why do they not fit in these boxes? And because of that struggle, I started to no longer believe in gender being, like, a strict thing between the sexes. In the back of my mind, this was like a very sexist, not to mention homophobic idea of, oh, well, women have to be like this. And it, like, if I deny that, like, flamboyant gay men are, like, this effeminate, then, like, obviously I'm being sexist and homophobic, and that just didn't sit right with me, because I grew up in a very pro-gay marriage sort of, environment. Moving on, I guess, a little bit, a trans female wouldn't understand, like, if you set a trans female and a trans male in the same room and actually made them talk to each other about these things, like, actually, instead of, like, beating around the bush, the female wouldn't understand why the male would, like, revoke his male privilege. Why would he give up all this power that he possesses? Like, he oppresses women after all, so therefore, like, why would you want to escape that? Because that's where she wants to go. She wants to go with what he has. Likewise, the trans male would look at the trans female and he wouldn't understand why she's giving up her female privilege. Why is she giving up her easy mode in life? Why would you want to be the evil sex that, like, everybody hates? And I've even seen some trans females, like, namely the binary ones, will admit that they can no longer smile at babies, like strangers' babies. They can't talk to someone's kid because now they're seen as potential creeps by the parents. It's weird to me to see like these same females try to accept that this is how men are treated in society. Like, some of them don't tolerate it, and then they detransition, but others will be like, oh, well, this is just what men face, so I just gotta man up and accept it. Like, clearly what I see when I observe these trans females, they're lamenting it, because a lot of them do like babies, and they want to cuddle and, like, you know, interact with them or something, whatever it is. And it definitely shows that, like, they get sad about it. And obviously not all trans females want to interact with a baby. I'm just saying, like, as an example. I mentioned detransitioners. They will express relief that they can finally do things that they couldn't while presenting as a guy. So, like, an example would be they are relieved that they can, like, dress pretty much however they wish, and people won't really bat an eye, because, yes, factually, women get a lot more leeway in what they can wear, whereas guys have a lot more, like, limitations. Otherwise, he's seen as gay and effeminate and, like, not a real man, which that should change. On the flip side of that, like, a trans male would, maybe he's really into something really, like, super male dominated, STEM fields, coding, speedrun tournament. Other people will find it strange that this trans woman is so focused on it. Or maybe his behavior is typical of male aggression, and people think, like, oh, that's not very ladylike of you. So in my case, going off on the trans female thing, is, for me, I was very socially submissive, and, like, I don't know, I was very passive, I was very soft-spoken, and that made people not like me as a guy, because that made me not manly enough, and that was wrong. Like, I couldn't be an effeminate guy at all. Which is really ironic, because where I live, it's like, I've always understood the place where I live as being very liberal, very progressive, and very pro-gay, and yet when they actually see an effeminate guy, or in this case, a girl trying to look like a guy, they get so upset. So we're not exactly as progressive as I thought. Continuing the detransition thought train, from the D-sisters and the detransitioners and the questioners that I've listened to and spoken with, I've reached this conclusion that many trans people transition out of hatred and envy of the opposite sex, which I want to say right away, that is not a good reason to be transitioning, because then you're doing it from a place of hatred. What's the point of transitioning to a sex that you hate? And I've also just observed that they can't seem to tolerate or understand the sex they believe they are, and I'm sure some of you have observed that yourself, like a trans woman womb envy, and they'll be like, oh, I want periods, and because you, a biological woman, have periods and you're talking about them, how fucking dare you talk about your periods, because that makes me feel bad about not having one. Like, you know, like, wait, I thought you were saying you're a woman, so shouldn't you just be like, oh yeah, that's just kind of what happens? Shouldn't you be, like, thankful that you don't have one? There's so many guys I'll talk to when I'm, like, talking about my period, they're like, damn, I'm glad I wasn't born a woman, because it's kind of a burden. Why would you, like, ask to be tortured? And then I see trans females very much hating men. I mean, they won't call themselves this, but it's very apparent that they'll assume themselves as a male feminist, but they'll just call themselves feminist, because they haven't pieced together that they would therefore be called a male feminist, because feminism is for girls and women. they will be intolerant of most masculine behaviors, avoiding too much masculinity themselves, because not only is it not within them to act that way, because they're female and not naturally that aggressive, or at least aggressive in the same way, but also to avoid being hated by everyone, in other words, avoiding toxic masculinity. They want to be that guy that's not like other guys. The guy that, in a feminist fashion, they'd rather see men behave as. And to me, I think it's really sad seeing that, because they want to avoid toxic masculinity and therefore give women space, right? Because, men only take up space with their manspreading and their mansplaining, and because of this they wind up silencing and marginalizing themselves anyway, or like how they perceive women to be as. So basically they just become exactly what they were trying to escape from. So it's like being a silenced, invisible woman to a silenced and invisible man. Trans females are envious of the privilege they perceive men to have, and they transition hopefully to obtain this privilege. And I think it's this reason why more trans females detransition more frequently than trans males do, because they tend to notice far more quickly, especially when they pass, how hard men actually have it. Once they enter the real world, the one where, like in a school setting, let's say, or a certain therapist's office, the people in that environment are gonna be like, they're gonna treat them like a girl who's pretending to be a boy, so they're gonna act nice. Whereas in the real world, your location, trans stuff hasn't touched it yet, so they don't really, they don't acknowledge trans people. So they actually, again, especially if she passes, she will be treated just like a normal guy, and that's tough. It's tough actually being treated like a guy. Meanwhile, the trans males are envious of girls and women, because to them, girls and women appear to live life on easy mode, like I said, while they get it so hard because they weren't perfectly masculine as they are expected to be. Or they genuinely believe that men are monsters, either because they grew up with that rhetoric, or because of bullying, whatever that would look like. Women pretty much do nothing but look pretty, or simply by virtue of being born female, somehow they get luxury sent to them on a silver platter. So I tend to see trans males participate in like toxic feminine behaviors, like being catty, bitchy, sassy, lazy, not doing anything, forcing the men in their life to do shit for them without giving anything in return, because that's what they believe women to do. And I say this because I've heard stories about it. Women to them are trophies, useless but good looking, whom everyone treats with alleged extra special care because she's the fairer sex and she just deserves it. Pretty much what they see. There is no downside to being female presenting, and whichever ones that they do discover, they pretty much chalk that up as validation. And some trans females will do the same thing, like I had said. And pretty much because of this, that's one of the big reasons why guys don't detransition nearly as frequently. And I have a relevant video that goes more into those types of reasons. This is just one. In addition to these points, the males think, like, not all of them, like there's a specific subset of trans males that think, like, even if a woman is chubby or ugly, she can still have sex because she's a woman. I'm going to elaborate on this in its own video, and it's going to be titled Transmaxing. You'll see. I will say that a lot of this is false observation, assumption, and bias, because most women don't want to be flirted with, Most women don't want to be seen as an object. Most women don't believe they live on easy mode. In fact, they see men have it on easy mode. Meanwhile, most men don't see that it's easy to get promoted. Most men aren't heard when they claim they've been sexually harassed. In fact, he should be celebrating that he did, that he got that kind of attention from a woman. Gender non-conforming or unmanly guys are less likely to be heard by others, and believe it or not, but good-looking guys get more positive attention than average or less than average-looking guys. And if he looks weak, he's not going to get these amazing things women and girls think that he automatically gets because he's male. If you actually take the time to ask how the other half lives, you should be able to find that their life isn't any easier or like worse than yours. You were born male or female, but that doesn't reflect your worth as a person. You have chosen to believe that you have it worse because fundamentally you've been rejected in some way, whatever that is, like bullying from peers, friends, family, maybe even strangers, due to homophobia, mental illness, sexism, whatever. It's convinced you you're worthless as your natal sex and you must change. And as for the non-binaries out there, many of them haven't really experienced that same thing, but they'll be convinced they're non-binary because simply disliked certain pressures from their family or their friends that they didn't like growing up with. So they're trying to change the narrative on its head. And so finally, the last thing that I want to part ways with here is men and women, ideally, they can look like anything. There's no set mold to what men and women should look like or behave. I want to say that because a lot of the time, trans people, even non-binaries, will be like, this is what men look like, this is what women look like, and it has to be this certain way, otherwise I won't pass as that sex. Or even going as far as projecting onto like historical figures, animated characters, that, oh, this one's gender non-conforming, that therefore means that they're trans. See that one character from Granite Falls? He's trans. See that one airplane pilot in that one century? She's trans. Like, stop. Men and women can look like any sort of variation of gender nonconformity. It doesn't have to be one strict way of being. And personally, for me, I chose kind of a, I don't know, I wouldn't really call it a high femme sort of fashion, but it's higher than what I was when I was growing up, for sure. And I chose a more feminine appearance because that's what I wanted to do. And it was something that I had avoided as a kid so strongly. I hated femininity with such a burning passion. And so when I grew up and matured, I was just like, you know what? I don't think there's anything to fear with femininity. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a neutrally existing thing that's out in the world, and I can use it if I want to. It doesn't reflect validity of my womanhood. It's just something that I've decided to dabble in because it's fun. And there's like a lot of gender non-conforming gay and bisexual guys who are into it too because it's fun. Makeup's fun. Long hair, it's fun. The best part about me choosing the fashion that I choose on a daily basis is that I defined it for myself. That trans perspective of women have to be like this, boys or men have to be exactly like this, and they can't do anything else. They have to be one way of thinking. And I'll just see a lot of these confused the FTMs being like petrified of anything feminine. I try to say to them, you don't have to be petrified of just something that neutrally exists. You don't have to wear these things. You don't have to encompass femininity. You can at least just say, that's a thing that exists. And it's okay that it exists. And it's okay if it's on me sometimes. I don't need to wear it because it doesn't define me as a woman. It's just there. When you add your own flair to it and your own personality to your, in this case, your own femininity, it becomes yours. And that feels freeing. Another method that I did was I stopped thinking that girls and women held a certain connotation. Girls to me had meant at the time frivolity. They have superficiality, impracticality. They were uninteresting, inactive, and most of all unfunny. I think the best way to remove the connotation of what you believe womanhood and girlhood has to be is watch gender non-conforming women. So like female comedians, like actually good ones. Avoid the feminist comedians. They're really shitty. Go for some certain GNC actresses. I would say Ellen Page, but she's no longer with us anymore. Singers, characters in books, which I've seen like especially older media has these gender non-conforming girls and women. And that concludes my video on this. I hope that was informative and, I don't know, at least mildly interesting. Hopefully my next video will be soon, sooner than this one took. But whenever that is, I'll see you when I see you. Goodbye.